man, I'm Kevin Smith. This is Sundance 2019. You're looking at the IMDb studio at Acura Festival Village. And look, it's the director and the cast of Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. Give it up for him, ladies and gentlemen. My lord, I hate you for having me say that title. It's so long. But you didn't come up with the title. Was it a script that was on the blacklist I saw?
Yeah, Michael Worry wrote an amazing script that was, you know, it's been on the blacklist, a couple attempts to get it made, and I don't know, it was sent to me, and somehow I said the right things, and we sent it to Zac, and we sent it to Lily, and actually, this entire cast were my first choices. I mean, how many times do you get that dream come true where the people you go out to first out, you get them? But yeah, it's an amazing script, and you know, for me, it was a way to. There are a million serial killer movies, so the way the script was by going into the mind of the victim,
yes,
felt like a new way to tell the story, and an important one. You know, America has 5% of the world's population, but 67% of the world's serial killers, believe it or not, since they started keeping those statistics. But
do you just whip that stat out everywhere?
You know, actually, it's the first time.
You will not have friends if you're like, you know, America has 67% of serial killers.
It's the first time I've said it, right? It's the first one that I've said all day. But
he's whipping out the new ones for you.
But
nice, thank you.
But it's actually the first time we said it today. But the point is, you know, despite all of those serial killers, the one that rises to the top is Bundy. So people know a lot about Bundy. But the thing about Bundy is that he was so charming and seductive. People just couldn't believe he was capable of that stuff. And that's what this movie is about. It's about deception and about how these people operate. And Worry's script, which was such a great script, really allows us to go into her point of view. And I thought that was what makes it special.
That was the fresh approach on it.
Yeah, exactly.
You are a man who's known for a true crime doc series that is absolutely indispensable if you love film in general. The Paradise Lost stuff. So seeing you cozy up with material that's also based on true crime, to me, I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense. But mostly, you're a documentarian. Very rarely have you dabbled in the feature stuff, correct?
Yeah, this is my first movie in about 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I wanted to wait for. You know, I've read a lot of scripts that I just didn't feel were special for me. I wanted to do a script where I felt like all my experiences would pay off. If 1,000 people could do the script, then it didn't feel like something that I wanted to do. But I felt all of my life experiences came together on this particular movie. In particular, you know, I've spent, as you referenced in Paradise Lost and a couple of other TV series, I've spent a lot of time on death row looking into the eyes of people accused of horrible things. And, you know, you have that moment of panic. You know, you're advocating for somebody who's wrongfully convicted, and sometimes I have that moment of like, oh, gee, am I being snowed? And now, just for the record, the Paradise Lost guy's completely innocent. I'm not questioning their innocence, but that's after doing all the investigative work. But in those initial contacts, you're staring across from people and they're telling you that they're actually innocent when everyone believes they're guilty. And you have this moment of panic like, well, maybe they're being charismatic and believable, but they're really full of it.
Right.
And so that's what makes this film so cool, because it allows me, well, at least cool for me as an experience, it allows me to turn that idea on its head. Because what is a wrongfully convicted person? It's somebody who is actually innocent, but everyone believes they're guilty.
Right.
But with Ted Bundy, he was somebody who was guilty of the most horrendous crimes, and everyone thought he was innocent for a long time. You know, even in his Miami trial, he had groupies attending, thinking he was innocent. And so the idea of turning this wrongful conviction thing on its head and looking at the impact on the victim and how he becomes seduced by a serial killer, really, it's why I wanted to make the film.
Excellent. I don't know how else to say this, but like my whole life, I've seen Ted Bundy pictures and I've seen Ted Bundy media and stuff. They've made movies of him. They always present him as like he was so attractive and shit. And my whole life I was like, no, he's not. You, on the other hand, are the most Ted Bundy on the planet. I think you're overplaying this, man. I don't, you know. What was it like to be called and said, hey, you know, Troy Bolton, come here, be a wildcat over here?
Oh, man, I don't know.
It's deep cuts, right?
I'm still blushing so hard. Thank you for that.
I was going to drop a Gabriella and a Sharpay reference, but I'll leave it right there and we'll move forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, I decided to dance my way
right.
to this. But, I mean, wait, what was the question?
What was it like to play a killer, man?
What was it like to play a killer?
The question was, what's it like to be the most
Ted Bundy.
There you go. That was it. He was listening. Thank you.
That is one of the most interesting things about this guy, Ted Bundy. Everybody that was fascinated by the trial, everyone in real life in the world that was watching it go on in the news and the media, which was all relatively new at this point in time. Like TVs were pretty new. Your nightly news was kind of new. Now we have phones and stuff like that. But this was a day and age when getting information at home about any sort of crime or murder was very scary and savage. And this is a guy who got away with it so many times. And having been, and I think everyone has a moment in life when they feel or they're kind of in a situation where they're like Liz. They feel like they know somebody and they don't entirely. But every once in a while, you meet somebody who just does it so well, and you are blown away that you didn't know who that person was. And so I am profoundly intrigued by what it takes to be that person. What makes them operate? What makes them tick? Do they really love? What the hell's going on? How is this possible? So it was really interesting.
Is there a moment where you're like, I don't know if I should play a bad guy, or like I don't know if I want to go here? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think the last thing I wanted was to do something that seemed like a desperate move to not be Troy Bolton anymore, because like I love Troy Bolton. Bro. It's been years, but I love that dude. And I didn't want to make a movie that was like running around or glorifying a killer, hacking, slashing. That's not really my thing. I've seen that movie 100 times. But this is much more interesting and goes into the psyche of really two very interesting people, and it's very personal and honest, I think. So
nice.
Yeah.
Second year in a row for you, correct? You were up here last year for...
well, 2 years ago, but that was my first time for To the Bone.
The Marty Noxon movie?
Yeah.
This time you come back with the heavy lifting in this picture. Like, apparently you're the reason that this movie's different than every other Ted Bundy movie, because we're going through your character into it. Carrying a lot of weight into the flick. Is that like something when you read, you go, oh great, it's more about me? Or is it like, oh crap, how do I have to sell this?
Well, I think the most interesting part about it is that she's still alive. Her and her daughter are still alive, and we had the pleasure of, Joe and I traveled to see her, but she also visited set. But this was a story told, through the eyes of a victim who is still with us, which is rare, especially a character like Ted Bundy. And so to play a woman who not many people know even existed, let alone still exists, was a really powerful thing for me as a young woman to kind of tap into, and to give a voice to one woman in particular, but that represents a lot of women that, we're also hearing more and more stories in today's world where people are coming forward about things. And it was, no pressure. No, but there was a sensitivity that I think we all wanted to give, and an empathy. We're telling a woman's story who has never spoken about anything, and to really be sensitive to that while telling the story in the most honest and truthful way. And I really just believe in Joe so much that we all really, we're just like, we trust you. You've seen the truth. You have been on death row interviewing people. You know what's BS and what's not. And so to bring that truth into it was really heartening, and I felt very confident. But yeah, I am very excited for people to have empathy for this woman, but all victims of, like what you were saying, people that you think you know and you really don't. Because a lot of people go, how could you be that dumb that you didn't know? Right. Well, no, hold on a second. Like, this is the genesis of that, and this is how it actually happens. And so I think it's really powerful to give that opportunity for people.
You said you're giving voice to the person whose story they've never given voice to before. And so that means that's a character or a person that the whole world doesn't know. When you're going to play that person and you have met her, do you take anything? Do you feel like, all right, I got to do certain mannerisms like that person did in the room, or you're like, nobody's ever met this person before, so I could just interpret it myself? With
this being so sensitive, I wanted to pay as much tribute to her that she would allow. If there were certain things she wanted to keep out, those were off limits. When we went and met with her, she gave us access to personal photos that no one has ever seen before. She gave me handwritten love letters to touch and to feel and to read, and that was disturbing but also a beautiful gift to be given as an actor. I asked her a bunch of questions. I wrote down all the answers. We went through and said, what do you mind me using? What do you mind me not? And yeah, no one's seen her, but I have, so I wanted to play her as truthfully as possible.
Right on, man. Well done. You, sir, this seems like the first movie in a long time you could literally get away with saying, I see dead people.
No, not Jerry.
Take us into who you're playing. We talked before the festival, you and I, for IMDb, but...
And crazily, we were just talking about this. Last year, I was here with a film called Clara's Ghost, and then I flew from Salt Lake directly to Cincinnati to start work on the film. I still had all my snowboard and all the stuff that I'd taken up to Sundance. And my flip-flops, which I enjoyed wearing to set to freak everybody out in the snow. It's something I like to do. But
it really freaks people out.
It does,
Yeah.
especially her. Yeah. But Jerry, I think, is an invented character who is just sort of in the position of trying to pull Liz out of the Bundy black hole and to sort of try to get her to envision a life beyond him. And it was crazy because like my first day on set, like I had this intense like phone conversation with Zac on the other line in the house when he calls Liz at home, and then we had like all of our big like showdown
in 2
scenes
days.
like in the first couple hours of getting to
Things
set.
got violent.
They did. It was crazy. There was improv, but it's a wonderful group of people working under extreme weather and schedule constraints. And I just had a blast the whole time I was there. It's just a special group of people handling a very intense subject matter in the best way you could imagine. So
You've been up here a number of times, including we had Yoga Hosers
just
up
twice,
here.
yeah. It's just last year and this one. Yeah.
What is it like for you to be up at the fest?
It's crazy. I didn't really know what to expect because I had never been here until last year, and it's just I was at the opening night dinner. Getting to see a lot of filmmakers and actors speak from a whole range of films, and just the passion for filmmaking at a difficult time for the country and a difficult time for the industry in some ways, a time of transition. The spirit of the festival and focusing on making sure that stories that don't really get a voice in the corporate filmmaking world a lot was really inspiring, and and it just seems very authentic too. Yeah.
You are the person that starts telling her that he is a bad guy, am I correct? But when I look at you, all I see is Westworld, man. You were phenomenal, phenomenal on Westworld.
Thank you so much.
How did you come to this project? How did you come to be involved here?
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Joe Berlinger on a documentary that he was filming during a film that I was doing. The documentary is called Intent to Destroy, and the movie was called The Promise. It was about the Armenian genocide. Yeah. So after meeting Joe, I obviously was very impacted by all his work, like Paradise Lost, like you mentioned. And then he gave me a lot of his films, and I saw all of them. And I just find him to be an incredible filmmaker. And I was very fortunate to be privy to this script. He brought it to me and said that, do you have any interest? And I was very, very interested because it's the psychological point of view of looking at someone that seems ordinary. And it's the real question of, can we see the truth about someone when you first meet them? So I watched a lot of the courtroom case videos on YouTube about Ted Bundy before this, and I was amazed about how charismatic he is, how just he knew how to handle himself, and he seemed like a lot of people that I'd met, both men and women. This ability to manipulate was just fascinating to me, and to be the voice of reason in a way in the film was very empowering for me as a woman, because I relate to Liz. I relate to Lily's character very much. And so I thought, this was also, because I find all the characters that I play are there for a reason, like Clementine. They do give me gifts, and this woman was kind of the moment of change in my life where it gave me strength to see clearly. And so I love that I got to play that part in this film, because it also changed me. So thank you, Joe.
Oh my God, what a beautiful answer, man. Let me ask you this. I know, aren't they great? What year did this take place? Ted Bundy was 70s or late 60s?
Well, Liz and Ted meet in '69 in a Seattle bar. '74 to '78 was the killing spree, first in Seattle, Utah, Colorado. He escapes from prison in Colorado, flees to Florida in '78. That's when he does his most vicious killings, and the Chi Omega sorority killings. Trial is '79. Conviction is early 1980, and execution 1989. And that time frame is another reason why I was so fascinated in doing this project because, as you know, as you mentioned, I've done a whole bunch of true crime. I kind of hate the true crime moniker that's associated with me.
Why?
You know, the Wikipedia calls me a pioneer in true crime. I like the pioneer part. I don't like the true crime part because true crime implies some voyeuristic wallowing in the misery of others and in people's worst moment. And
like cops.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I like to, you know, I like to think that the true crime that I've done has a social justice component. I've advocated for victims' rights. I've shined a light on criminal justice reform, wrongful conviction. So I love true crime if there's a social justice component to it.
Yeah, you don't do sensationalism.
Yeah, exactly. But what's so interesting about Bundy, I mean, we have one of the reasons I think this film will do well, besides an amazing cast and amazing performances and an okay director, one of the reasons I think
pioneer, I've heard.
Pioneer, yeah. The reason I think this will do well is that, as we all know, there seems to be an insatiable appetite right now for all things true crime.
Yeah.
And the reason that is, I trace it back to Bundy himself. Bundy was the big bang of true crime programming because Bundy's trial was the first trial that allowed cameras in the courtroom nationally. It was the first time, you know, only a few months before his trial, television news was still being shot on 16mm film. And all of a sudden, this new thing called electronic news gathering and satellite technology was coming into its own just as the Bundy trial was starting. And so Florida let cameras in, and it's the first time that a trial was covered gavel to gavel live as entertainment for America. And you can trace a line from there to Bundy's execution 10 years later. It was the first time mobile satellite trucks were starting to be used. You know, the ubiquitous 50 trucks that show up to every crime scene now. Right. The first time, or one of the first applications, was Bundy's execution, which again was primetime television, you know, not the execution itself, but the incredible media circus around it. You can take that line and trace it right to the O.J. Simpson trial, which was the first time, well, not the first time, but now the 24-hour news cycle is kicking in, the proliferation of cable stations, and I think, you know, this is now why we've just taken this as entertainment, and it's why, if I may say, you know, because so much true crime is entertainment, it's why everyone here feels it's so important that this movie not glorify Bundy. And, you know, there's been a little chatter here and there because of our trailer, oh, are you glorifying Bundy? Just the opposite. We're trying to show people how you become a victim. Because, you know, as Bundy has said, you know, killers don't come out with, you know, big fangs and blood dripping from their chin out of the shadows. They're people you least expect, whether it's a pedophilic priest, a high school coach who does something he shouldn't do, or a serial killer. These are the people you least expect. And as a father of daughters of this age, of the Bundy victim age, I can't think of a more important message to put out there that people better deserve your trust before you give it to them. Absolutely. Because the people who do terrible things aren't the guys we want to feel safe that a serial killer is somebody easily identifiable, because that implies you can avoid that. Right. But that's not what happens. So.
And that's really, yeah, I think it's a super important message for today. It's like a swipe left, swipe right. You're going to be my friend. Like, it's so easy now. More than ever, this should help people really think about who
be
their
a bit more
friends
discerning
are.
about who they let in their lives.
I think it's interesting, actually, as you were talking, Joe, about your previous work and how usually Joe physically frees someone wrongfully accused. In this, he's emotionally freeing the victim.
Nice.
And it's interesting because usually...
Put that on the poster.
Oh, man, I gotta rewrite
Don't
the
worry,
director
it'll be in my...
Holy shit, that was
No,
great.
because usually the victim's gone.
Yeah.
In your case. Like, they're dead. They can't speak for themselves. In this case, she is still around, and we associate being free with physicality, whereas emotional baggage and emotional prison can sometimes be worse. And I think that's why you were kind of the perfect person, because free in what sense? You know, for Liz, what she needed was to finally see the truth and like let it go. And so for us to kind of show that, I think is also a different side of it, but also really, really important.
Incredibly well put. You should write a memoir or something.
I'm stealing that.
Let me say this before you go. This you've got this Ted Bundy movie on Netflix. Just dumped the other day. Yeah. Another Ted Bundy thing, which you're also involved in.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. So I did Conversations with the Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, which is a 4-part Netflix series, and that came out on the 30th anniversary of Bundy's execution, which was January 24th, 1989.
Right.
And now a couple of days later, we have this film. It's kind of, it seems like some master plan of mine to control Bundy and be the Bundy guy. It's too long a story to go into now. It was very coincidental that all these projects came together at the right time. But actually, nothing happens everything happens for a reason, is my belief. And I think what's beautiful about the two projects together is that they really, one is a deep dive into the mind of the killer, and we don't shy away from, any kind of description of all the horrible evil he wrought, which is the documentary. And the movie is kind of a deep dive into the mind of the victim. So they're kind of like two halves, that kind of work well together. If you don't know anything about Bundy, you still will enjoy our movie tremendously. But if you have questions, you go to the doc. And then if you see the doc first, I think there'll be little things you notice in the film that, are like little things that are there that, if you don't get them, it's fine. But if you do get them, it's, because you know the story, it's just an added bonus. But I think more importantly, they both kind of tell the whole story of what it's like to be someone charismatic and charming, and how that type of person can seduce us. And I think that's important, because my personal philosophy is that, again, we want to think that serial killing is some aberrant, separate behavior in some corner somewhere. But sociopathic behavior is one long continuum. And on the easiest end are just people who are jerky, lie, manipulate because they want to. And there's some of those people in our business, unfortunately, and others.
I've interviewed so many of them today.
And on the other end of the spectrum is the worst level of serial killing. But the reason I think it's important to recognize there's one spectrum is that all these people are three-dimensional human beings, not some two-dimensional monster out there. And you have to understand the human element to understand how this can come to pass and how to avoid it, more importantly.
Last question for you. As the filmmaker, you've spent, it sounds like, the better part of a year double-fisting Ted Bundy. So much Ted Bundy in your life. Can you put it down?
I have to put it down.
Right? Like at a certain point, you've got to be like, that's,
I jokingly say to my friends, because if you really look at my filmography, it kind of boils down into two buckets: murder and music. And it's time for a music film, man.
It's true. And but I should say before I let you go, as a Metallica fan, did you get James Hetfield to play a cop in this movie?
Mr. Hetfield is going to be in the house tonight, by the way.
He's going to be at the show?
Yes.
Some kind of monster himself.
Yeah, he was good. He was
he has a small role as the cop.
He went full method, though. Showed up in character.
He came dressed as a cop?
No, he didn't show up dressed as a cop. But he did it. He crushed it.
He went for it.
He's a man. Over the years, I've just, he, besides being, my favorite, hard rock and front man, he's got this amazing presence and this amazing voice. And I just thought that could be harnessed for a movie. And so luckily he said yes.
That's a filmmaker right there. Somebody who's like, you'll be useful someplace else. This is the winner hat, man. The last thing you guys go before you go, put your hand in there, pull a question out. Everybody answers this question, then we let you go off into that cold, cold night.
Do you want me to read the question?
You read the question and they can all answer.
Okay, now I need my glasses. All right. It's big enough. There's a history of Sundance stars and directors moving on to the Marvel Universe. Who would you like to play in the MCU?
Marvel Comic Universe.
There you go, kids. Who would you like to, here at Sundance, a lot of the directors move on to Marvel movies. Who would like to play a superhero? What superhero would they like to play? Who wants to begin?
Oh, man.
This is how you get out of the room, so you got to answer.
I don't know. The Marvel Universe is so expansive. I really enjoy what they're doing with all of the movies right now. So I don't know. It's a big question. I don't want to say something now and have
it come haunt you later. It's a fucking
or
comic book
take
movie
me out
question,
of the running. I don't know. I think there's a lot of the X-Men are really cool because there's a lot of places to go and a very real world to me. I think they're doing a great job building that. So I don't know. Maybe one of them. I don't know.
They're going to reboot it soon. Marvel's bringing the X-Men back into their family, so that could happen.
Yes. I will, I will take any of them, really.
Yeah, right? Me too. Oh, my God. I'll be the guy
maybe if there's one that has, the superpower of, looking young for their age, that seems to be something that no one seems to believe that I'm actually almost going to be 30. So maybe if there's one like that,
Are you serious? You're going to be 30?
Yeah.
When?
Next month.
You look like you're 12, in a good way.
But see,
you
that's
look really
a superhero
young.
right there.
Yeah,
no one
true.
realizes
Deceptively
it,
young.
What
about you, sir?
Are there any that left? They've
taken them all.
Seems like they've got them. If they're rebooting X-Men, I used to love playing. Remember that huge arcade game where you could play five people could play an X-Men game? I do Cyclops in the reboot, you know?
Nice. But then nobody would get to see those beautiful eyes of yours because you're wearing those visors.
I know, it would be a little reversal.
Those eyes, they need those eyes. What about you, Angie?
Well, I love, do you recall the Batman movies, the ones that Tim Burton directed?
Very, very well, yes.
All right, so I love Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman.
She was phenomenal.
Thank God I didn't say that. You've got the eyes, girl. You take it.
I think I'd like to do that. But I take anything from Disney. You know, they have all the Marvel characters.
They do.
Or Spider-Man.
Is Star Wars
Sony,
in there too
Fox.
now?
I don't know. What you got?
This is the opportunity to beg for a job at one of the major studios. Fair enough, man. Give it up for the filmmaker and the cast behind the movie Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile.